The little church on Mill Creek Road had been dying. Its pews, once full of hardy farmers and faithful families, now sat mostly empty, dust gathering in the corners where no one bothered to clean. Reverend Jeremiah Pratt had been its last shepherd, and when he collapsed mid-sermon, the church had gone with him. But now there was a new pastor. Elijah Carter arrived with a Bible in one hand and a second chance in the other. Mill Creek wasn't the first struggling church he had been assigned, and he figured it wouldn't be the last. But he had no idea what was waiting for him in that pulpit. The first Sunday was uneventful. A few old-timers showed up, sitting stiffly, watching him as if waiting for something to go wrong. It did. Because when Elijah opened his mouth to preach, another voice spoke with him. At first, it was faint, like an echo. But the longer he preached, the stronger it became, layered beneath his words, like something unseen was co-preaching with him. The air turned thick. The congregation whispered nervously. He stopped, and yet the voice kept speaking. Elijah's skin crawled. The deep, gravelly tone was familiar. Jeremiah Pratt. Elijah staggered back from the pulpit. The voice faded, and the silence that followed was worse. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then one of the elders, an old woman with silver hair and knowing eyes, whispered, "You should leave, Pastor." But Elijah didn't leave, because the next Sunday the pews were fuller. Word had spread that something powerful was happening at Mill Creek Baptist. People came to see it, and when Elijah stepped into the pulpit again, the voice returned. But something was different. This time, Elijah's voice felt stronger. The words came smoother, filled with a weight that sent chills through the room. People leaned in. They shouted, "Amen." For the first time in years, they believed again, and Elijah couldn't ignore it. So he stayed. He preached, and every Sunday the congregation grew, and every Sunday the pulpit tightened its grip on him. As the congregation swelled, so did the attention. A regional news station covered the revival at Mill Creek. Soon after, a production company came knocking, offering to turn Elijah and the church into a reality show, a weekly program on faith, power, and transformation. Publishers sent contracts, eager for Elijah to write a book. People called him anointed. They said God was using him to lead a movement. The temptation was intoxicating. If he signed, the church would be on every screen in the country. His sermons would reach millions. His voice, his power, would be greater than ever. But in the quiet of the night, when the congregation was gone, Elijah felt the pulpit pulling him back. And when he tried to step away, he couldn't. He was being claimed, just like Pratt before him. The night, long after the congregation had gone home, Elijah found himself sitting in the empty church. He didn't remember staying. He turned to leave, but he couldn't. His feet wouldn't move. His hands rested on the pulpit like they were chained to it. His mouth felt dry, but inside his head, a voice spoke. "You feel it, don't you?" Elijah swallowed hard. "Who's there?" A shadow moved at the back of the church. A figure stepped forward, half in light, half in darkness. Jeremiah Pratt. The next Sunday, the church was packed. Elijah stepped to the pulpit. It welcomed him. He felt the weight of it settle over him, felt its grip tighten. And as he opened his mouth to preach, the voice rose up again, but this time he fought it. The pulpit tried to hold him in place. The words stuck in his throat. The pressure built like invisible chains wrapping around his chest. His vision blurred, and then, with every ounce of willpower he had, Elijah stepped back. The moment he moved away from the pulpit, the air snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight. The pulpit splintered in half. A deep guttural cry filled the church. Pratt's voice, the pulpit's voice, roaring in rage as the wood cracked open. The congregation screamed, the walls shook. and then silence. Elijah stood gasping as the dust settled. The pulpit was destroyed, and for the first time, the church felt light. The next Sunday, Elijah preached from the center of the room, standing among the people. And his voice, it was his own, again. The book deals, they disappeared. The network retracted their offer. The congregation shrunk. Some left, looking for a preacher with more fire, more power. But those who stayed, they were free.